Good evening, everyone. So, today's class is live on YouTube. So, even though there are some topics of previous class, I think in previous chapter we have not completed all the topics. There are some topics remaining which we will take in next class. Today I just wanted to start with a new topic because some new students will also be watching on YouTube. So, this is so far we have covered one major pillar of, you can say, economy, that is monetary policy and related concepts related to money, inflation and all such other aspects. Next, another important pillar that we have to focus on is fiscal policy. So, for those who are watching for the first time on YouTube, there will be some concepts in economy which are interrelated with whatever we have discussed in class earlier. So, if you don't understand about those topics, it is linked to previous topics. I will try to break it down as far as possible, but it is not possible to explain all the previous concepts. So, if it is the first class of economy that you are attending, it may be a challenge, but otherwise if you know something bit about economy already, then you can understand this. This is, I think, 16th or 17th class of economy class here. So, today we will be discussing about fiscal policy. So far what we have discussed is monetary policy. In fiscal policy, basically the major actor here is government, whereas in monetary policy, who is the major actor? RBI. Monetary policy is RBI's policy. Earlier we have taken, you can say, we have tried to understand what is monetary policy, what is fiscal policy broadly. We saw that if economy, Indian economy is like an airplane, then monetary policy, that is RBI, and fiscal policy, that is, you can say, government, both of them come together to run this airplane, and government's responsibility is to focus on growth and development of the economy, whereas RBI's responsibility is what? Control of inflation. So far whatever we have seen is RBI's responsibility and associated concepts. Today what we will see is fiscal policy. Earlier, one important topic we had discussed is virtuous cycle. Virtuous cycle, how it works is, as demand in the economy increases, this leads to increase in production, this leads to increase in employment. As employment increases, people will get more salaries, and this further increases demand. This entire fiscal policy, monetary policy, both of them, ultimate objective of these two policies are, you can say, in the end is to make sure that they create this virtuous cycle and maintain this virtuous cycle as it is. Whenever it becomes a vicious cycle, that means whenever demand decreases, we call it as vicious cycle, because as demand decreases, production decreases, employment decreases, people's income will decrease. So we don't want that to happen, and that means we will try to reverse it. Same thing RBI used to do it as well, and now government also will try to do the same thing, but its ultimate goal, long term goal, is actually growth and development, not just inflation control. So fiscal policy is the use of government revenue collection and expenditure to influence a country's economy. Earlier, monetary policy we had seen, RBI is present. What RBI is trying to do is actually reduce and increase interest rates. By reducing and increasing interest rates, it is affecting banks. That means banks are reducing and increasing interest rates. As interest rates are reduced, more people will take loans or less people take loans? More people. That means we are increasing money supply in the economy or reducing money supply in the economy by, you can say, controlling interest rates. As we increase money supply in the economy, what happens to demand? Demand increases. If money supply is reduced, then demand decreases. So this is exactly, you can say, what was happening. And here in fiscal policy, what we actually do is, you can say, from government, what exactly it will try to do is also same. That means government here will try to, you can say, control the economy. That means money supply in the economy. If government has to increase the money supply in the economy, RBI what it will do we have already seen, that is RBI will control the interest rate. By controlling interest rates it can control the money supply. But how does government control money supply? Government has only two possibilities here to do anything with regard to money supply. Government can, you can say, increase spending money or reduce spending money. Whenever government increases its spending, more money flows into the economy. Whenever government reduces spending, less money flows into the economy. This is, you can say, spending. And second, government tax collection. Government can collect tax from people. If government collects more tax from people, then less money is available with people. If government collects less tax from people, then more money is available with people. Earlier we have seen expansionary policy and contractionary policy. What is the meaning of expansionary policy? Expansionary policy means we are trying to increase the money supply in the economy. Expansionary monetary policy tried to increase the money supply in the economy. How did it increase it? RBI reduced interest rates, bank reduced interest rate, people took more loans, and that means more cash was available in the economy. As more cash is available in the economy, demand increase. This is what we call as expansionary monetary policy. And now think of it from government's perspective. When we say expansionary fiscal policy, then government will also try to increase money supply in the economy. How does money supply increase? From these two perspectives, spending and tax. What should government do to tax to increase money supply? Government should reduce the tax. And what about spending? It should increase the spending. This is called as expansionary fiscal policy. And if it does exact opposite, that means imagine it wants to reduce the overall money supply in the economy, then what should it do? So government has to do exactly opposite. Government has to collect more taxes from people so that people have less money in their hands, and government has to, you can say, reduce its spending so that overall money supply in the economy reduces. You understood this? So in that sense, the ultimate goal of you can say RBI also and government also here is to control the money supply. That means by controlling money supply they are trying to control the economy. So here government RBI's policy was slightly complex because it was indirect. That means as RBI changed the interest rate, bank had to change the interest rate, somebody had to take a loan and they had to bring that money into the economy, etc. But government's policy is very simple and very direct. Government, whenever it wants to increase money supply, immediately it can do it, and whenever it wants to reduce money supply, immediately it can do it, because it is very simple to do. Because government, if it wants to spend more money and tax more or tax less and spend less, it can easily do it. It can take a decision and immediately implement it. You understood this? In that sense, which one is quicker to implement? Fiscal policy is quicker. Fiscal policy is also stronger because we don't need anybody else to make any other choice. In monetary policy we saw that once RBI reduces interest rate, sometimes banks will not reduce interest rate. That means banks have to make a choice here to reduce interest rate, and then people have to make a choice there to take a loan, and that means you can see multiple people it is dependent upon multiple other people, whereas fiscal policy is very direct and very immediate and very strong, because there is no need for anybody else to make any decision. Once government makes the decision, automatically it will change money supply. You understood this? So this is basically fiscal policy. So someone is saying increase volume, others if you are able to hear, then you can say yes. If nobody is able to hear properly, then we'll increase volume. Otherwise you guys increase your volume, you will be able to hear it. So now fiscal policy is the use of government revenue collection and expenditure to influence a country's economy. That means we are collecting revenue from people through the mechanism of tax, and we are also spending money in the economy. By this we are trying to control the supply of money in the economy, and because of this reason we are controlling the economy. Fiscal policy refers to the policy of government with relation to taxation, public expenditure, and final one is called as public debt. Sometimes government cannot tax beyond a point to people. Why it cannot tax people? If it tax too much, what happens? People will stop paying tax. Imagine tax is 10%. Nobody likes to pay tax, but somehow they will pay. 20%, still they don't like it, but they will feel it is fine, we can pay it. 30%, some people won't pay tax. As of now, some of them are not paying tax because tax is 30%. There was a time when tax, I think during Indira Gandhi era, there was a tax slab even of 70% also. At that point, nobody wants to pay 50%, 60%, 70% tax. They will feel, if I am earning 100 crores and paying 70 crore tax, why should I earn this much money? Why should I work, you can say, do all these things? They will feel I will just enjoy my life instead of doing all this, and they will reduce their work itself. It will discourage, you can say, work, and some people may leave the country and they will settle in another country where tax is less. You understood this? This will lead to drain of wealth and drain of brain drain and wealth drain both. And that is why it is not a good idea to tax beyond a certain limit. There are other reasons also why we should not tax beyond a limit. We will see later. But you understood that sometimes we need money but we cannot tax people much. At that point, another alternative is government can take a loan. So loan is also, you can say, another aspect where government can get money. The largest source of income is still tax, but sometimes we can use loans to support this income that we get through tax. You understood this? So these are basically fiscal policy instruments. Everybody understood fiscal policy? So far we have just set the context. We know that there is overall economic policy. Like I said, economic policy means monetary policy, fiscal policy combined put together is called as economic policy. Both of them, what are they trying to do? They are trying to control the economy in such a way that in the long run there is growth and development and control of inflation at the same time. RBI is responsible for controlling inflation, government is responsible for increasing growth and development. They will both coordinate each other, like I said, like two pilots of an aeroplane, and they will run the economy. So this is how it is working, and we saw RBI tries to control the economy through this mechanism. We have already seen many times in earlier classes. And fiscal policy is not very different from monetary policy in that sense, but it is actually even more simpler because there are only two major tools here, because either they have to spend money or they have to raise tax. There is no other. Government's mechanism is not complex, it is very simple. You understood this? Any questions until here with regard to fiscal policy and its overall, you can say, relation to monetary policy? As I asked yesterday why RBI can't print extra money during 2013 oil price rise, it leads to inflation. I meant subsidy. Isn't it the indirect form of giving extra money to people? Okay, when we give subsidy, is it like giving indirectly like extra money to people? Yes, we can say it is like that, but it is not necessarily extra money coming outside from circulation. Government is just taxing from somewhere and giving this subsidy here. Or it is taking loan from some other rich people and it is giving subsidy here. That means what happens to overall money in circulation? It will remain constant and it will not create inflation. Only when you bring extra money into circulation, then you can say inflation is created. You understood this? Okay. So, fiscal policy is also called as budgetary policy of government. I think for both of these batches there is polity is done, right? So in polity you would have studied parliament chapter and a bit of budget also, cut motions and how budget is passed and money bill and finance bill, appropriation bill, etc. So fiscal policy is called budgetary policy of government. Anybody knows why it is called as budgetary policy? Because all government expenditure has to go through a process called as budget. Without going through this sort of a process, budgetary process, you can say it is not exactly allowed for government to spend money. So earlier we used to have, you can say, only a king, and king used to do everything. That means there was only one institution during the time of maybe consider Ashoka or Akbar, or so even in other countries also there used to be kings, monarchs, and these monarchs had ultimate unlimited power. They could do whatever they want, and that means they were the ones who made the law also. That means, and they were the ones who executed the law, and they were the ones who became judges. You might have seen in movies, Akbar had a court where he will judge whether somebody is guilty or not, and he will be the one who will give some royal firman and sign on a particular document, and he will make the law. He will execute the law. Sometimes he will use his own sword to, you can say, execute punishment and kill someone also. So that means king makes the law, executes the law, adjudicates whether a law has been broken at one point or not. This arrangement was problematic, so we split the institution of the king into three separate organs: legislature, executive and judiciary. Today whatever the king used to do earlier, only one single institution of the king is now done by three separate institutions, what we today call as legislature, executive, judiciary. This is called as separation of powers. But what was the problem with not having separation of powers? Why couldn't we have just one king? It leads to concentration of power. Okay, what is the problem with concentration of power? It leads to tyranny. Okay, what does it mean? There may be exploitation. Imagine king does not like someone, then imagine king does not like short people or some people who are taller than him or something. He may pass a law saying that people who are taller than 7 feet, 6 feet or something, they should all be killed. Imagine he is 6 feet and people who are taller makes him uncomfortable. He will make a law that people who are taller than 6 feet should be killed. Then this law, is it fair? It is not fair. He can make any arbitrary law because king is king. So that means then who decides who is below or 6 feet, above 6 feet? If he does not like a person, even though he is short, he can still decide that he is taller than 6 feet and he can kill him also. You understood this? Adjudication is also done. Execution is also done by him. That means he will decide. You can say what punishment should be given. Should we put him in jail or should we kill him or what we should do exactly. So this creates, you can say, arbitrary exercise of power without any fairness, and this is not, you can say, good for the country, good for people. Because of this reason we split the powers of the king to prevent this concentration of powers in one person, and we created legislature, executive and judiciary as separate organs. Once we created this legislature, executive, judiciary, we felt that now that they are separate, we can also introduce some accountability between them. That means when legislature does some mistake, executive and judiciary will intervene and they will try to stop that mistake. And similarly, when judiciary tries to do it, others will stop it. When executive tries to do it, others will stop it. This way, what we have done is we have created three organs, and these three organs between themselves, they have checks and balances. Separation of powers is actually dividing the powers of the king into three organs. Checks and balances is actually three organs holding each other accountable. Because all the three organs are holding each other accountable, anything that passes through all the three organs and finally comes out has high probability of being in the interest of people and not in the interest of any one particular section of society or a person or something. You understood this? Any law that is passed will go through judicial review. Usually somebody will challenge it in court, and judiciary, if it upholds it and says that it is fair, just and reasonable, then it is fine. It is good for people. You understood this? So this is how it is working currently. In polity you would have already seen, imagine legislature. It is possible for Prime Minister to dissolve entire Lok Sabha and go for elections. And similarly judiciary can also, you can say, disqualify a legislator or something they can do, they can punish the person. So, and if they have done, you can say, some crime according to law. Similarly, judges can be removed by legislature through some process that is there, you can say how to remove a Supreme Court judge, etc. So that means you can say they have power over each other. Why we have created this sort of a system where they have power over each other? To implement these checks and balances, we have created this sort of a system. You understood this? So that ultimately they should be able to hold each other accountable, and finally whatever comes out of this whole process should be good for public interest. This is the whole, you can say, process that has happened in the last 400-500 years. From the king we created separation of powers, legislature, executive and judiciary. Eventually we developed all these mechanisms in such a way that ultimately the probability that something, a law that is passed by, you can say, parliament and comes out through all these things, everybody has approved it, then probability is very low that it will not be good for people. You understood this? As a process, as a part of this process of creating checks and balances, we made parliament the custodian of public purse. Public purse means who will hold the purse of the people, who will hold all the money that has been collected as tax or all the people's money is actually parliament. That means parliament in India and in any other parliamentary democracy also is actually called as the custodian of public purse. All the money collected will actually be, according to the constitution, it is owned by parliament, and parliament has to give permission to executive every year to spend that money whatever has been collected from people. And this process where parliament, who is actually going to spend this money and execute policies? Executive. Parliament will hold the money and executive will spend the money. And the executive has to explain to parliament why they are spending this money, how they will spend this money, and why is it a good idea to spend this money like this. And this process where executive will actually give this explanation to legislature so that they will approve this spending is called as budget. You understood this? It means actually who wants this money according to the constitution is legislature, and executive has to ask permission from legislature to spend this money because constitution has given the authority to control this money to who? To legislature, to parliament. So in parliament, executive every year goes and they will ask permission that we want to spend this much money this year, and for all these type of purposes. Then legislature can ask questions to executive, and they may even pass cut motions and prevent spending in some areas, and in other areas they will allow it. Then they will pass whatever you can say finance bill, appropriation bill, etc. And once that is passed, then we can consider that legislature has given permission so that executive can spend this money. You understood this? And that is why fiscal policy is called as budgetary policy of government. Why is it called budgetary policy? Because it has to happen through a process of budget. Without happening through a process, that means without this budget being passed, it is not possible for government to spend a single rupee. Government will not be allowed to spend without approval of parliament. There are some exceptions where parliament will give post facto approval. That means in extraordinary circumstances they can spend a little extra money and then take permission later from parliament. But otherwise, in normal cases, they have to first ask permission of parliament and then spend the money. You understood this? So you can see that whatever government's policy is, it needs money to spend that, money to be spent to execute that policy. And if it has to spend any single rupee, it has to take permission from parliament. And if it has to take permission from parliament, it has to pass the budget. And that is why all fiscal policy goes through the budget. Every year when budget happens, that is actually the fiscal policy that will run throughout that year. You understood why it is called budgetary policy here? Any questions so far? So this is basically the conceptual aspect link between polity economy, which is explaining why it is called budgetary policy. What is the link between budget and fiscal policy? So now coming to second point, it uses public expenditure and taxation as instruments. This we already saw. That means government uses two instruments. It will spend the money, that is public expenditure, means in the budget it will try to spend money on various things. Can you give example of what it will spend money on? It will implement some welfare schemes, like for example MG Narega. It will give wages to people in rural areas. Under Gram Sadak Yojana it will build roads by spending money. Awas Yojana it will build houses. Gramin Bhandaran Yojana it will build warehouses. And similarly lot of other schemes, a long list of schemes are there. So you can see government is spending money and doing all these things in the budget. And so it uses public expenditure and taxation. Can you give example of taxes? Income tax, customs duty, corporate tax, GST, these are all examples of taxes. That means it will collect the tax from people. So it will use these two as major instruments of policy, and using these two instruments it will execute this policy, and that is what we call as fiscal policy. Its objective is to influence production and employment favorably. That means what is the ultimate objective of government in general? So in the first class we discussed, in syllabus they have specifically given the first three words in syllabus is what? Economic development, social development, sustainable development. They have given development everywhere. That is the actual goal of government is development. But if development has to happen, development means what? Development means standard of living of people. That means people have to feel that their quality of life has improved compared to earlier. When people feel subjectively that their quality of life has improved, then only we can say that there is development. For development to happen, growth in the economy is a precondition. That means if growth happens, then we can convert this growth into development. We cannot automatically convert growth into development. What is necessary in the middle? When does growth happen? So when we increase production, growth happens. If growth has to convert to development, then two possibilities are present. One, government will tax rich people and redistribute this income among poor. That is also going to improve quality of life of people. Or because growth is happening, automatically employment of people will increase and people will be able to get more salaries. Across the society, this money will be distributed, and then also people's quality of life will improve and development will improve. So government's objective here is increase production, that means increase growth, and then increase employment, and that means you can say development will happen. You understood this? Government being able to do it is, you can say, only 20% it can do. Remaining 80% it has to happen through employment only. There was a time when government was very large compared to the size of the economy. Government was 70% the size of the economy when we got independence, because private sector was very small. At that time government itself was large, and government using its welfare schemes used to solve developmental problems by itself. But now government has become smaller and smaller in relative size to the economy. Indian economy is size, if you see what is the size of the economy and what is the budget of India, then in 1950s, if the size of the economy is this much, budget of India was 70%. Now it has become only, you can say, 20%, 30% size, because we have large private sector in India today. Private sector, government is supporting private sector and developing private sector. Because of this reason, government is, you can say, becoming relatively smaller compared to the private sector. That means government alone will not be able to create development by using welfare schemes for everybody. So that means private sector, or you can say employment, we have to create, so that enough number of people are employed in the country, then they will be able to achieve development. Why government alone will not be able to do it? Consider today how many people are coming into workforce every year is approximately 20 crores. Why so many people are coming into, you can say, because population, we are in that stage where huge amount of population is coming into workforce. Some of them are coming after 10th standard, some after 12th, some after, you can say, degree and post graduation or something. But if you put all of them together, how many people are trying to seek employment, then it is massive. We are unable to create, Indian government totally and all the state governments put together employ only 3 crore people. Is it possible every year, if so many people are seeking employment, is it possible for government to give employment to all of them? No. Then what should government do if government cannot do it alone? Then private sector has to do it. Government has to, you can say, support the private sector, or you can say create some facilitatory mechanisms to, you can say, enable the private sector to create more jobs. If more growth is happening and more jobs, employment is being created by private sector will earn money, and other people will also earn money because they are employed now. Government will also earn money because they will collect tax from private sector. You understood this? So this is basically objective here of fiscal policy, is to increase production in the country. Who will actually do this production? Government earlier used to do most of this production, but now primarily most of the production happens through private sector and employment. That means we want just the production is not going to help us. Just production will create growth in the economy, but growth is not automatically going to convert into development. That means there has to be employment in the country, then only it will convert to development. But that does not mean we will abandon this, welfare effort that will continuously be there. But you can say it is only a fail safe. That means it is going to help only 20-30% of the population. If you have to help entire 100% of the population, then we have to create more jobs in the country by creating more production. If production has to increase, then how will we increase production in the country? Knowing what we know already about, this virtuous cycle, what should we do to increase production? We have to increase demand. When we increase demand, production will increase. When production increases, employment will increase. As employment increases, people's incomes will increase and further demand will increase. So this is why we want to create virtuous cycle. You understood this? So now we understood what is fiscal policy, what are its objectives. Then we have already seen expansionary monetary policy, contractionary monetary policy. Now we can understand easily what is expansionary fiscal policy, contractionary fiscal policy. We already discussed it. Expansionary fiscal policy means we are trying to increase money supply in the economy, and to do that, if we have to increase money supply, we have to reduce the taxes and increase spending. And we have to, if in contractionary policy, expansionary policy is also called as easy money policy, loose money policy, because money is easily available. Contractionary money policy is also called as tight money policy. So that means money is not easily available. Money is not easily available in the economy means what should happen to tax? Tax should be more, government expenditure should be less. Expansionary policy is easy money policy, contractionary policy is tight money policy. You understood this? So, expansionary fiscal policy, low taxes, high spending, we already seen, it is used to increase growth. Whenever we go for expansionary fiscal policy, it will increase the money supply in the economy. As money supply increases, demand contains two components we have already seen. One is ability to buy, willingness to buy. Willingness to buy is already high in India and in any other developing country compared to ability. By increasing money supply, we will increase ability, and that means we will increase demand. When demand increases, this virtuous cycle is created. That means whenever we go for expansionary fiscal policy, as virtuous cycle is created, growth will also increase. Same logic as monetary policy, whatever we have seen earlier. In recession times, so usually expansionary fiscal policy, when do we go for expansionary fiscal policy? When do we go for expansionary monetary policy? Consider, when do we go for contractionary monetary policy? When inflation is high, we want to control inflation. Imagine inflation, actually ideally it should be between 2 to 6%, we already know this. Imagine inflation has gone to 8%. Then we increase interest rates. That is what we call as contractionary monetary policy, so that you can say inflation comes down. Imagine inflation has gone to -1%. Then we go for expansionary monetary policy, we will try to push more money into the economy. If inflation has gone negative, it means growth has also probably become very, you can say, low, because growth and inflation, how are they related? They are directly related. Usually whenever demand is low, it is not just growth that will reduce, inflation will also reduce. This is normal circumstances. We are not considering stagflation as a normal circumstance. Stagflation is an exceptional circumstance. In normal circumstance, growth and inflation are directly related, and when growth is low and inflation is also low, then we go for expansionary monetary policy, and when growth is high and inflation is also high, we go for contractionary monetary policy. And same logic for fiscal policy also. When do we go for expansionary fiscal policy? When growth is low. That means in India, growth ideally could have been 8%, but it as of now only 3 to 4%. Then what do? We have to increase demand, so that virtuous cycle will become stronger. To increase demand, same thing government will do. It will expand money supply in the economy by going for expansionary fiscal policy. So, and when there is a slowdown in the economy, slowdown means slight reduction or weakening of this virtuous cycle, what happens to growth then? Growth will reduce. Earlier, imagine growth was there at 8%, 7%, now it has come down to 4%. Then there is a slowing down of the economy, we want to go back to normal, we want to strengthen the virtuous cycle, then we go for expansionary policy. Imagine, when do we go for contractionary policy? When too much of, imagine 10% growth, it shows 9%, 10% growth, and inflation also is increasing very rapidly. At that time we feel that it is better to slow down a bit, and at that point of time we reduce the money supply in the economy. Because if it goes beyond that point, then we already saw in inflation chapter, what happens when inflation becomes too much? Then it will not send the right kind of signals for buyers, investors, even producers, everybody. So because of this reason, it is not a good idea to keep on increasing inflation, and that is why we go for contractionary fiscal policy. Contractionary fiscal policy, we already saw what we will do, we will increase taxes and reduce spending. So by doing this, we will reduce the money supply in the economy. By reducing money supply, we will bring back, you can say, this virtuous cycle to normal level of stability. You understood this? So this is, you can say, normal expansionary policy and contractionary policy. This part is actually linked to whatever we have earlier discussed. So if anybody has any questions so far, you can ask. Otherwise, we will go for pump prime. Any questions so far? So someone is asking what is virtuous cycle. This we have already discussed in class earlier, but if you are a new student on YouTube who has not watched earlier classes, then virtuous cycle means demand in the country, if we can increase demand, then it will increase production, it will increase employment, it will increase income of people and further increase demand because of increasing income. So because we have taken it in detail earlier, I will not be able to get into details of virtuous cycle now, but you can, it is actually there in NCERT books, you can read it there easily. So any other questions? No questions. So we will come to pump priming. To understand this concept of pump priming, you have to understand a bit about 1928 Great Depression that happened in USA. In the last century, or it will be maybe a little more also, the worst kind of economic situation that was created in the entire world is this 1928 Great Depression of USA. What exactly happened at that time? Basically, First World War started in 1914 and it ended in 1919. When it started, First World War was majorly fought in Europe. It was called as a trench warfare. Trench means, imagine Europe, you might have seen the map of Europe, it will look like somewhat like this. Trench means they will dig a trench, these countries are fighting with, you can say, these countries. Trench means it is actually mostly plains there. In these plains they can easily see each other and shoot each other. So what they will do is they will dig a trench, that means they will dig some sort of a hole, big long one, and they will all go into that, and whenever they get energy they will come and shoot and go back into that same trench. This is basically trench warfare. If they are successful of, you can say, killing enough enemies, they will push the trench forward and they will keep on pushing the trench until they occupy the entire country of, you can say, whoever is fighting with them. This is how trench warfare works. They will keep digging holes, after capturing another 3 kilometers, another hole, another 3. So this is how trench warfare works. You understood this? So in this trench warfare, they passed through many towns and cities also during this trench warfare, and they will do shelling, artillery shelling. They will drop some cannonballs and such on the factories and buildings and houses, everything there, and everything will collapse. If factories across Europe, the trench is moving up and down like this and it is destroying all the factories and houses, everything there. What happens to production in Europe because of this? Production in Europe reduces. As production reduced in Europe, so US felt that, you can say, we can export things to Europe and make money here. They started exporting for even arms and ammunition also, and whatever else they needed, everything was exported by USA. USA until then it was a moderately developed country, just like even European countries. It was relatively more developed compared to today's developing countries, but still it was already 200 years old as a democracy, and it had sufficient level of development to be able to exploit this opportunity to export. When it started increasing export, whatever it produced machines and it produced whatever is necessary for the war effort and also for people's survival, even textiles and basic necessities, food also was exported from USA to Europe. Then all the money started flowing into USA, and US became, you can say, very rich in a very short period because it was exporting hugely. As it exported, it kept on increasing production capacity in USA because more and more demand was there for export. Because at that point there were hardly any rich countries which were capable of producing the kind of necessary equipment that is necessary in Europe. You understood this? So only US was there which was capable, and it kept on producing more and more. And as it kept on producing more, it was becoming, you can say, more and more richer, and it was a strong virtuous cycle was created because demand was increasing. As demand increases in USA, what happens to production? Production keeps on increasing. As production increases, employment also keeps increasing. People were working overtime, double jobs, because they were getting huge money for, you can say, extra time that they were spending. And so they just, you can say, kept on increasing the work and increasing production, increasing export. In 1919, the war ended. The Treaty of Versailles was signed. In world history you would have studied. After the end of the war, usually in a country, if the war ends, what will the country do? Once the treaties are signed and the war ends and everybody goes home, their houses are all destroyed, what will they try to do? they will try to rebuild it, rebuild the factories, rebuild the houses, etc. Especially after a war, there is a renewed sense of patriotism in every country. They will try to rebuild the country by all the people coming together, they try to rebuild them. And all the European countries also same thing happened, they felt that we have to rebuild better compared to even whatever used to be there. So then Germany and all these countries, they emerged as manufacturing superpowers. They were able to produce better engines of cars compared to US now. This war ended in 1919 and 1925, 1926, by this time you can say rebuilding was over in Europe. Once Europe has completed its rebuilding, then what happens to exports of USA to Europe? The US is not able to export anymore to Europe. If US, imagine it was producing 1000 cars. Before the war started, actually US was only producing 200 cars which it sold in US itself. But now, because of the war, all the cars that were consumed in Europe were produced mostly in US, and that is why it increased its production capacity to 1000 cars. And it made sense during the war. But after war was over, you can say Europe was producing its own cars. Then what happens in USA now? Imagine 1000 cars are produced in 1926 or something. If 1000 cars are produced, then earlier they used to send 800 cars to Europe. Now in Germany, Germany is selling cars to entire Europe, in Europe itself. Because of this reason, nobody is buying US cars anymore, because it is costly to cross the Atlantic Ocean and sell it, you can say, in Europe. Then what happens to export from 1000 cars? Sales will reduce back to 200 cars. Now 800 cars are remaining in inventory, they have not yet sold them. Then what do you think car makers will do in USA? Will they produce more cars or less cars? Less cars. In fact, because it was the difference was so high, they said we will stop production until we sell this inventory because it is too much. And so what they did was they reduced production in some factories and they stopped production in other factories. When production reduces, what happens to employment? Employment is reduced. They felt that there is no need to work second job, first job also. Half the people will fire. In some other factories, they said everybody, you can say we will treat you as temporary workers. When we need more production, we will, you can say, send you a message, telegraph or something. Until then, you don't have to come. You understood this? So basically, this led to mass unemployment in USA because suddenly there was no more demand from Europe. Majority of the demand was coming from Europe. Suddenly this demand dropped as European reconstruction was done, and as demand dropped, this created a very strong vicious cycle in USA because now demand had reduced, production had reduced. As production reduced, employment reduced drastically. That means everybody was out of a job in USA, and because we were out of a job, they did not have enough money, and even these 200 cars that were sold, they were because they had jobs they were buying. Now even that is also not possible. Next year only 50 cars were sold because all the people lost their jobs. You understood this? So if demand inside the economy also started reducing drastically and outside the economy also started reducing. This sort of a situation when demand is so low and production is not happening, everything comes to a halt. This is what we call as depression. Recession means you can say economic activity is still happening but has slowed down, maybe for 3 quarters or 2 quarters, 3 quarters. There is a definition clearly in textbooks you can see. Slowdown is mild, recession is slightly stronger, and depression is very strong. Depression means this sort of a situation. In fact, the depression in USA was so strong that they had never seen any sort of anything like this before. People started selling all their assets so that they could survive, and at one point it reached such a situation in 1929. Government said people are not able to afford food, so we will distribute bread in the evening. Bread and soup was distributed, and there were long queues for whatever government was distributing for free, this bread and you can say soup. Because people did not have jobs, they have sold everything whatever they had because they had to survive, and nobody had any job, no production was happening, economy had come to a halt. You understood? Imagine like midday meals or something whatever we are giving for children. Similarly, they were started giving in every government office at the end of every street to anybody whoever wanted food, they started giving bread. You can see how you can say suddenly from huge amount of wealth creation, suddenly it came into this sort of, in 10 years span, it came to a situation where people were, you can say, dependent on food, on government. This is called as the Great Depression of USA. And when this Great Depression happened, there was no clarity on exactly how to solve this problem in USA. At that time, economics was not as well developed as it is today. Today, the theoretical development and experiments we have done, all these things have led to, you can say, some level, a better level of development of the entire discipline. But at this point, we did not have the same level of clarity and understanding of economics that we have in, after 100 years now. You understood? So at this time, there was a strong belief that actually this entire virtuous, they knew about virtuous cycle, but this virtuous cycle starts, they felt, from not from demand, but from production. They felt entire economy is run by few rich people. These rich people, they are spending their money and they are setting up factories. Because they are setting up factories, employment is being created. And employment is being created, they are getting money, and because they are getting money, the economy is running. You understand? So at that time in USA, there was glorification of all the rich people. Government used to give tax exemptions. They don't need to pay tax at all because they are the ones who are responsible for running of the economy. All the tax was collected mostly from poor, and rich people were exempt from mostly, you can say, any amount of tax because they were investing all their money to run the economy, to improve the economy further. This sort of a belief was present in USA. So at this point, any problem in the economy, the solution was, so rich people will invest more money, they will increase production further, more people will get employed, and as more people get employed, they will get salaries and demand increases, and this sort of cycle, virtuous cycle is created. So far it had worked because, so somehow demand is increased because they are increasing production, demand increases, and then this whole thing happened. But at this point, this whole theory stopped working because already overproduction had happened. That means inventory of cars, we saw in this example, huge amount of cars were already produced and they were kept aside. At this point, can you produce more? Imagine, because there is a recession, there is depression in the economy, if we ask the producers to produce more, will they produce more? Why they will not produce more? They will say, first we have to sell this 800 cars and all our money is stuck in this inventory only. We don't even have any money. If they sell that cars, then they will get money to buy raw materials and produce. Otherwise, all their whatever cash wealth was there, it is stuck in whatever inventory they have created. And if that is not sold, then they will not have money. And if they don't have money, they cannot produce more. You understood this? So at this point, this solution was no longer working. This is called as supply side economics. And there was a strong belief in supply side economics that we increase supply, then all problems will be solved. But then now at this point, after 1928 Great Depression, the belief in this supply side economics was destroyed because it was no longer possible by increasing supply to solve the problem. You understood this? So at this point, there was an economist called as Keynes, John Maynard Keynes. So Keynes basically, he came up with a solution for this problem. He said, this virtuous cycle is actually not created by supply, it is created by demand. People initially they were resistant, they did not agree to this entire change in overall economy's understanding. Obviously, if a new idea comes, there will be resistance to it. So he tried to tell everybody that we have to increase demand, and if we don't increase demand, we cannot restart this cycle. So they kept on trying some other mechanisms to increase, you can say, production only, but people were not interested, and whatever government did also, it did not work. So at this point, Franklin D. Roosevelt, FDR, was president in USA, and because FDR had run out of choices, he did not know exactly what to do to get out of this depression. And only one other alternative that was there, some person is saying something, Keynes was saying that, okay, we can try something else, and so he felt we have tried everything, let us try this also. And so Keynes was asked how to solve this problem. Then he said, you make me your advisor, I will implement new policy. Then Keynes was made economic advisor of Franklin D. Roosevelt US federal government, and they implemented a new policy which they called as New Deal macroeconomics. In New Deal economics, fundamental understanding about the virtuous cycle changes from supply driven to demand driven. Today we saw that entire cycle starts from demand, that is actually coming from Keynes. So Keynes says we have to increase demand. If we don't increase demand, production will not increase. And if we increase demand, imagine in USA they increase demand, then people will buy these cars, 800 cars, maybe out of that if we can sell 500, 600, then companies will get money, they can convert this cash, cars into cash, and they can buy raw materials, and this whole thing will start virtuous cycle. You understood this? So here you can see Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal based on recommendation of Keynes. What Keynes said basically was, if you have to come out of recession, then we have to increase demand in the country. And how to increase demand? If we have to increase demand, aggregate means the total average demand of the entire country, then there are some possibilities. One, either consumption spending has to increase. All the consumers in the country, do they have any money to spend during this depression? No. That means because consumers don't have any money at all, then can we increase consumption spending? If we can't increase, then maybe it is possible to increase investment spending. Investment means, will investors invest more money in an economy which is in depression? Nobody will invest there. That means even investment spending is not working. Then another possibility is exports minus imports. If we can increase, exports are 1000 cars and you can say imports are only 100 cars. Then if exports are more than imports also we can earn money. But right now exports have become zero, maybe imports are still remaining. That means this also has become negative. This is not going to increase demand. You understood this? So that means only one possibility is remaining, government spending. If government increases spending, so what should government do? Keynes gave a radical different idea. He said, government should start some schemes where it will employ lot of people, millions of people. Temporarily, government will employ all of them and build some infrastructure or something, build dams and roads and railways and such. And government will give salaries to these people. If we want, we can print money also. Because in a depression, what would have happened to growth? It would have gone to negative. If growth has gone to negative, what would have happened to inflation? Inflation also is negative. In this situation, even if you print extra money also, inflation will only come from negative to positive, but it will not go, you can say, to uncontrollable levels. Until it comes to positive and comfortable level, we print money and we employ people, and using this money we will give them salaries, and when we give them salaries, they will get money into their hands. When they get money into their hands, they will start buying whatever, you can say, cars and such, whatever is their inventory which is not sold, they will start buying it. That means we are increasing demand, and when they start buying it, all these factories, what they will do? They got the money now, they will start buying raw materials to produce further, they will employ more people to produce, and when they employ more people and buy raw materials, this will create a virtuous cycle. That means it will increase demand further. And this is what Keynes suggested, that government should spend money because nobody else can spend money right now. In US at the time, government's role was very simple. Because the entire economy is run by the rich people, government's role was only to protect the economy from any external threats and internal threats. External threat means if nobody should attack US, and means they need to maintain an army, air force, navy, etc. And internally there should not be any law and order problems. That means police, and you can say maintaining law and order, investigation. This was the primary goal of government. Anything else, government should not unnecessarily interfere into economy. So it should just maintain stability and safety. This was the opinion about government in USA. But when Keynes said government has to invest money, if government has to invest money, where will they get the money? They will tax, you can say, people, or they will print money. When they print money, inflation as of now has gone negative, but at one point it will come up because all the printed money, it will come into circulation, and once it comes into circulation, other economists said that we will not be able to control, you can say, how quickly this inflation will rise later. You understood this? Here you have to understand one thing, inflation can be seen as, imagine if government prints money, it can be considered as invisible tax to people, because imagine earlier 100 rupees was in circulation in the economy. Now government prints extra 10 rupees. Now totally 110 rupees is present. Now government has this 10 rupees. Because extra money is in circulation, what happens to value of money? Value of money reduced. People used to have 100 rupees, now it is worth only maybe less 90 rupees. That means it is as if government has taken this 10 rupees or not. What people have, its value has reduced. Where did this go? Because government printed the money, government has extra money now. That means the value of purchasing power of people will reduce and purchasing power of government increases when government prints money, and that is why it is called as invisible tax. Because government actually is not taxing people, but still it is, effect is same as taxing people. You understood this? Because in taxing people, what will happen? People's purchasing power will reduce, government's purchasing power will increase. When they print money also, same thing will happen. People's purchasing power will reduce because of inflation, government's purchasing power will increase. So they warned against printing too much, but Keynes said at this point we don't have any other choice, so we have to print currency and we have to, you can say, spend that money, otherwise we will not be able to get out of this whole situation. You understood so far what Keynes is arguing. To increase demand in the country, there are some possibilities. If none of the other possibilities are able to work, then we have to depend upon government expenditure. That means government has to spend more money. So Roosevelt basically took the advice of Keynes and they came up with multiple schemes. They started building lot of infrastructure projects. They built lot of dams. Some of the dams that they built at that point of time, I think Hoover Dam and such, they were built at that time. And the dams that they were built, they recently only China has surpassed the size of this dam. Since 100 years, nobody was able to build a bigger dam than that. And they built 5-layered roads, 7-layered national highways. That means long layer of, you can say, big stones and smaller stones, and then very high quality roads which will stay for 100 years. That means you can see they invested huge amount of money to do this. Basically they wanted to spend as much money as possible in the economy, because if they buy steel and cement and you can say the stone and crushers and all these things, then what is happening? The money is going somewhere. Money is going to some person who is selling the steel, and steel producer is actually producing steel and he is giving salaries to steel employees. You understood this? That was the primary objective of government. Secondary objective of government was whatever we are trying to do here, it should have a long-term positive impact on the economy. And that means if we build infrastructure using this, then we will have a long-term impact. And that at that point of time, in that crisis, whatever infrastructure they built, many of the infrastructure is still even today also it is present. So this sort of long-term vision was present, and using that they built, you can say, infrastructure. Even railways that they were they built at that point of time. Tennessee Valley Authority was the first project that they executed, and they created large dams and the irrigation facilities and roads. Like I said, 100 years, at least 70 to 80 years these roads remained, and in India 6 months, 1 year they will remain only, because we don't have long-term vision. We are just, you can say, the incentive system is built in such a way that if they don't lay another road next year, they cannot get another tender or project. You understood this? It is not that we are not capable of laying loads which will stay for 50 or 100 years. It is entirely possible, but it does not serve anybody's interest except only public interest. So the incentive structure in India is not designed in such a way that we go for that sort of infrastructure. You understood this? So Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal, based on recommendations of Keynes, was implemented. To come out of financial recession, monetary policy may not work due to liquidity trap. So this part we have actually, last part was there in monetary policy we have not discussed. I will explain what is liquidity trap. Consider what actually RBI does. Imagine there is a recession or this sort of depression that happens. Imagine in India itself there is a recession. Because of COVID there was a recession. What happens during recession? RBI feels that growth is low, inflation also is going too low, and that means we have to bring inflation back to normal. To be able to do that, what should RBI do? Interest rate has to reduce. When RBI reduces interest rate, banks will also reduce their interest rate. We hope that people will take loans and they spend in the money in the economy. That means money supply increases and demand increases, and we can bring back inflation and growth to normal. But the problem with this whole picture is, at this point, people are not taking loans because they are in a recession. Imagine in the COVID, imagine people are worried about whether they will remain with job tomorrow or not. Everybody is losing their job because of some sort of recession that is happening. And if they are losing their job, will they think about buying new car right now by taking a loan? And they are not worried about what is the interest rate, whether RBI reduced interest rate or not, it will only change 1 or 2%. But for them, what is more important is, will I be able to pay back my loan or not? You understood this? Employees will feel that I don't know, there is no 100% certainty that I will remain with my job for another 1 year. So let us postpone buying of this car by 1 year or maybe 2 years, later we will see. You understood this? This is from employees' perspective. Businesses, because people are not buying, they have become risk averse. They are not buying anything. What happens to businesses? Demand has reduced, because in recession nobody knows whether they will remain with the job, and that means even businesses will make losses. A loss-making business, will it take more loans or less loans? If they are making losses, they will feel it is, maybe I don't know whether I will be able to pay back this loan or not, let us just postpone this, later we will see. That means they will postpone taking loans, and nobody is interested to take the loans. When RBI has reduced this interest rate also, banks have reduced this interest rate also, people are not taking loans. In a recession or depression, usually monetary policy becomes weaker, and at one point may even completely stop working because people are not taking loans. For monetary policy to work, what is important? Finally, people should take loans or not. Monetary policy entirely depends upon this whole chain working properly. If reduction of interest rate happens, banks will take loan, people will take loan, they will spend the money, then only monetary policy works. If anywhere this chain is broken, then monetary policy fails to work. If monetary policy fails to work, imagine in the aeroplane one pilot is unconscious, then what happens? Who should take the responsibility of flying the plane? The other pilot has the entire responsibility of flying the plane. That means fiscal policy has to take the burden of both control of inflation and control of growth at the same time when there is recession or depression. You understood this? Monetary policy will work fine when situation is normal or slightly slowdown is happening, still it will work. But when we get into serious situations in the economy, some emergency type of situations, monetary policy will stop working, and that situation we usually call it as liquidity trap. You understood this? So in this liquidity trap situation, monetary policy fails to work and we have to depend upon fiscal policy. You understood so far? And in fiscal policy, we saw already what is expansionary fiscal policy, contractionary fiscal policy. In normal situations, they will just go for expansionary, contractionary policy. But in extraordinary situation like this, whatever happened in 1928 or any other such depression or recession, normal expansionary policy may not be enough to push enough money into the economy to create demand. At that time, they go for something called as pump priming. Pump priming means, like I said, bringing new money into the economy which was not in circulation earlier. Imagine RBI prints extra currency and it will bring into the economy. That is what we call as pump priming. You understood this? This is what US did at that point of time to create demand, and since then we have been using this. You can say in majority of the crisis in the world, this pump priming sort of situation has been used, you can say, to get out of recession. So for example, you can see here in Japan, Shinzo Abe was prime minister, recently was killed, now some other prime minister is there. So this was called as Abenomics based on his name, and he used the same thing, whatever Keynes had said. They increased, you can say, supply of Japanese currency so that demand will increase. In US and EU, it is called as quantitative easing. In the name itself it is there. Quantitative easing means quantity of money supply is increased by printing more currency. That is why it is called as easily money is available, quantity of money available will increase. That is what is called as quantitative easing. European Central Bank is printing more euro, and US Central Bank, that is Federal Reserve, is printing more dollar. This is called as quantitative easing. To come out of double depreciation, they used all these type of things. In India also, we did not face that kind of recession in double depreciation, that necessitated huge amount of printing, but we did a little bit. And now after COVID, we went for same, you can say, extra money we pushed into the economy, and you can say this is whatever we are doing now, expansionary type of policy. In newspapers, sometimes it is also called as Modinomics, just like Abenomics in Japan. In India, it is Modinomics. You understood this? But the policy is still same. Ultimately, what we have to do in, you can say, this type of a situation is increase demand in the end. And to increase demand, whatever is necessary, they will do it. You understood? So here you can see aggregate demand is the sum of all expenditure in the economy over a period of time. It is a macro concept. Aggregate means what? Macro concept. It is not about demand from one person, one company, you can say government or bank or something. We are considering the whole country. Demand in the whole country, ability and willingness to buy in the whole country, if we add up, that will become aggregate demand. Aggregate demand has some components. People, consumers in the country is spending, that is consumption expenditure. Investors in the country, investment expenditure. Government spending, government expenditure. If we can export more than imports, then that means we are catering to demand from outside the country. That will, you can say, be added to demand here. So aggregate demand will be, you can say, sum of all these demands put together. That is called as aggregate demand. Increasing aggregate demand is the ultimate goal if we have to go for, you can say, virtuous cycle, if you have to create virtuous cycle in the country. You understood the meaning of aggregate demand so far. So contractionary fiscal policy is simple. This pump priming actually is a term that is coming from, so earlier they used to have some sort of hand pumps. Now also in villages you might have seen they will pump water out of this pump. So sometimes what happens is something gets stuck in this pump and the water does not come out. Then what they do in villages is they will bring a big bucket of water and they will pour into the pump. The water, as it flows down, because it is flowing with force, whatever blockage is there, it will clear that blockage, and after that if you pump out, water will come out. So because we are pouring some money into the economy so that more money comes out later. It is, you can say, similar to this sort of pump priming. You understood this? Pump priming is also a term used in engines. Same thing in mechanical engineering, automobile engineering. In engines they will do same thing. If fuel is not coming out, they will pour some fuel, you can say, into that pipe and engine, and from the other side, and it will come out. So same thing happens here. Into the pump you will pour water, and here exact same logic is same. Money is not coming out means virtuous cycle is not created, tax is not being collected, production is not happening. So we pour some money so that more money is produced in the economy. You understood this? That is why we call it as pump priming. And contractionary fiscal policy is very simple: high taxes, low spending. That means we want to reduce the money supply in the economy, we want to reduce the money available in the hands of people, increase tax so that more money goes away from people towards government, reduce spending, less money comes from government to people. So this will lead to reduced demand. To combat inflation we will do this. We have already seen same thing with monetary policy. Here also logic is same. You understood this? Any questions so far? Whatever we have seen so far is just high level overview of what is fiscal policy. I have just tried to relate it with monetary policy because you already have strong understanding of monetary policy and how monetary policy is actually controlling money supply. Same instruments are different, but what they are trying to do is not very different from monetary policy. You understood this? Any questions so far? Yeah. So whichever, if you do x minus m minus x, finally imagine it will come out negative or positive. Based on that they will just add. Imagining imports are more, it will become negative. If exports are more, it will become positive. Think of it like that, then it is fine. Any other questions? So now coming to union budget. Earlier we saw why it is called budgetary policy, and also you can say this whole separation of our checks and balances that is present between, you can say, all the three organs of state. This union budget is actually, you can think of it as an intersection between polity and economy. Budget is important for both subjects. Article 112 of Indian Constitution, government has to present in the parliament an annual financial statement. In India it is now, in constitution nowhere it is written that the word budget is not mentioned anywhere in the constitution. Budget actually means, it is some sort of a briefcase or suitcase. In French it is boguette. From boguette it became budget because people could not pronounce this French or something. So because finance ministers across the world, finance secretary or minister, they used to bring this suitcase and read the documents in the parliament or congress. That is why it was called as budget or something. But nowadays Nirmala Sitharaman is not even bringing this suitcase, she is bringing some red color cloth bag or something. So because of this reason, it is, whether it is a word is suitable for India or not itself is under question. So now it is, you can think of it as annual financial statement, you can say, released by government to parliament. In article 112, this annual financial statement is present, showing estimates of revenue and expenditure. So revenue means whatever government has collected, that is called as, whatever government has received, that is revenue. Expenditure means whatever government is spending, that is called expenditure. This is called annual financial statement of, or also called as budget. Budget gives the complete picture of estimated receipts and expenditures of government of India for that year. That means budget is for usually which year? When we pass the budget, imagine recently we passed the budget, which year will it be for? It will be for next year, which will start on April 1st. April 1st 2023 to March 31st 2024, it has not yet started. Budget is released before the year starts. That means, imagine recently budget was passed, budget was presented, it means that you can say it is an estimate how much money government will spend. Earlier already told you that they have to first take permission from parliament. That means before they spend they have to take permission or not. That means they have to present the budget before they start spending the money. That is why even though financial year starts on April 1st, budget is usually, it has to be presented and passed, you can say, before this April 1st. So whenever a budget is presented, estimates of revenue and expenditure for the next year are present in the budget. That means how much money are we going to spend next year and how much money are we going to raise next year also. How much we are going to spend and how much we are going to raise. Usually budget will not just contain 1 year's details, it will contain, you can say, previous year's detail and current year which is running, this year's details and next year's details also. Next year's details are the most important, that is you can say 23, 24. But current year, it is still running, it is not entirely over. Here estimates of next year we will do. Estimate means what? Estimate means something which is not yet done. We are thinking that it is a forecast. That means this much money we will raise and this much money we will spend. But current year is already more than half is over. That means last year we had estimated how much money we will spend this year and half of it is already over or more than half is already over. We have a better estimate now or not? So that means because most of the year is over, we will have something called as revised estimate of the current year. Estimates of the next year, revised estimates of the current year, and last year is already over. For that we have actuals. Actuals means what? The actual numbers of how much money we were able to raise, how much money we were able to spend. So these three set of numbers will be present in every budget. Whenever they present the budget, actual budget is for estimates of the next year and revenue of expenditure and revenue estimates for next year. But along with that there will also be, you can say, two other set of numbers, that is revised estimate of the current running year and actuals of the year that is already over. You understood? So this is basically what are the three, you can say, set of numbers in the budget. One more aspect about budget is, compared to household budget, there is one major difference in government budget. How does anybody do household budgeting? Simple, from a family's perspective, think about it. They will think how much salary we are getting. Okay, imagine we are getting 1 lakh salary or something. Out of that 1 lakh we will save 50,000, spend 50,000. So this is how family will plan. Spending of 50,000 for household expenses, 25,000. For some other things, 25,000. So this way they will just split their income. This is how they are doing, you can say, household budgeting. But this is not how government will do budgeting. Government will first think about how much money do we have to spend this year. They will decide, okay, this year we will spend some 40 lakh crores. After they have already decided how much to spend, then they will think about how to raise this much money. That means they will first decide how much to spend the money, then they will think about, because government can raise the money somehow, because government can tax people. If government taxes people, can people say, I won't pay the tax? No thanks, I won't pay. If you say that, then what happens? Then because tax is not a choice on people, that means people have to finally pay this tax. It is not a voluntary payment that you are doing, it is compulsory. If you don't pay the tax, then there will be, you can say, it is actually a civil offense. That means there will be penalty. If you delay, they are assuming that you are delaying paying tax and they will impose fine for delaying, etc. If you don't pay tax, because of this delay, it will go to civil court. In civil court, the judge will ask you to pay tax. If you say no, then judge will hold you under contempt. Then it will become a criminal case and they will send you to jail. So that means you can see that it is not a choice to pay tax. That means once government decides that we have to raise this much money as tax, ultimately it will somehow raise that much money as tax. Because government can somehow raise money. It is not guaranteed 100%, but it is likely that it will be able to somehow raise the money. Through tax, through loans, and through sale of assets or something else, they will raise the money. Because of this reason, first all governments actually in the world, they will focus on how much money to spend this year, and then they will focus on how to raise this much money. You understood? In that sense, government's budgeting is reverse, not exactly same as household budgeting. It is somewhat, you can say, in reverse compared to household budgeting. You understood so far? Any questions until here? Then we have to understand budgetary process. This budgetary process, it will take some time, around half an hour. So we will take a break here, and after break we will start with budgetary process. Welcome back everyone. So we had to continue with budgetary process. Any questions in whatever we have discussed until now? How does fiscal policy affect money multiplier? Fiscal policy does not have any impact on money multiplier. Who can actually create money multiplier effect? Is only banking system, and RBI controls the banks, whereas government has no direct control over banking system. Any other questions? So coming to budgetary process, we saw what is the meaning of budget, and we saw that entire fiscal policy is actually budgetary policy itself. So that means understanding budgetary policy will become important for fiscal policy or process of budget. So how exactly process of budget happens? Process of budget begins, so I will just give this as a, you can say, framework for you, so that you can put entire fiscal policy in that context. Process of the budget is not going to be asked as a question in exam. It is only going to help you get the overall broad framework, you can say, so that you can say understand each concept in each bigger context. So the process of the budget actually starts around 6 months before the presentation of the budget. So that means you can see recently this budget was presented, that means is long back itself it would have started. Finance Ministry is the, you can say, nodal agency for this entire budget. So because obviously Finance Minister will present the budget in Parliament. Finance Ministry will send some forms to be filled by all the ministries and other ministries and departments. So they will all, what they will do is they will take these forms and they will fill it up. What will be present in these forms is how much money do they need for next 1 year, what they are going to do with that money. So this last year how much money they had taken, compared to that why they need extra money. This type of, you can say, information will be present, and they will fill up all these forms and they will say this much money I need for, you can say, next year. And once they fill up these forms, all these forms are collected and they are brought to Finance Ministry. These forms are called as demands for grants. So in polity you would have studied about this, demands for grants. Basically these are just forms filled up by all the departments and ministries. They would have written how much money they need for the next year. Take an example, some ISRO says we need 10,000 crore for next year. We are going to do some experiments, send some satellites, do some 3-4 launches and such. They will list out everything and they will say for this except this much money we need. So that means totally we need around 10,000 crores. That they would fill up in this form and they will send it to Finance Ministry. Because Finance Ministry has asked a open-ended question, how much money do you need? Everybody will think about maximum money they will need, and they would have given, you can say, ideally they could do maybe with 7,000, 6,000 crores also, but they will feel that ideally if we get 10,000 crore we can execute everything whatever is there in our pipeline to-do list. So that means they will ask lot of money, and finally when they add up all the demands for grants, then Finance Minister will get much bigger number compared to whatever is available to be spent this year. So imagine actually Finance Minister was thinking somewhere 40-45 lakh crore. Think of simple some one number, 40 lakh crore is the expenditure that they want to do. But if you add up everything it became 80 lakh crores. That means they are asking double the money compared to whatever the Finance Minister actually wants to spend for that year. But that much money they cannot spend. So what they will do is, Finance Minister, imagine Nirmala Sitharaman, she will go to meet the Prime Minister and other cabinet members. If they show these demands for grants to Prime Minister, then Prime Minister will say, we don't have this much money. Do one thing, you see what we have promised to people in our manifesto, some 70-80 points will be there. Focus on those points. Whatever we have not promised to people there, why do we need to spend money on all those other things? Because they have come to power based on some promises in their manifesto. And in that manifesto, whatever is matching to that, that is what they have to prioritize. So they will prioritize, focus more on that, and remaining things they will remove. After removing that, some money, will imagine they can reduce, maybe it will come down to 50 lakh crore or something, and still they have to reduce a bit. So cabinet and some finance minister and others, they will sit together, they will remove some things by themselves, so that it will come down to overall 40 lakh crores. You understood this? This political process also happens once this demand for grants are done, because ultimately where they are spending more money and less money is a political decision or not, because they have been voted by people to spend more money on something. It's a priority given by a political party in power to something is actually a political decision. Because of this reason, this whole process is also political. Once that is done and it is decided where they have to spend money, imagine one party tries to spend more money on maybe empowerment related schemes, other party spends more money on development, tangible development. We saw, for example, building roads and railways and such other things. So either way, ultimately all schemes have to go for, you can say, people only in different manner. So this is how you can say they will make this decision. Once this is decided, then the final touches are given, you can say, to this entire budget. They will last 6-7 days. Nobody is allowed to go in or out of this ministry building, whatever you can say, finance ministry building. They will be locked inside, because whatever this budget related information is, it should be kept secret. Because if a new tax that is going to be issued on a product or some company or something, tax exemption on something, it leaks out, then the share prices will change because of this, and it will lead to some people making big profits, whoever has this information, private information of government. You understood this? To prevent that, they will lock the buildings and in those final days they will, you can say, do some final decisions with regard to budget, and they will decide how much overall budget document they will prepare and how much budget we have to present this year. Once that decision is made, usually on the budget day they will open the seal of this building and they will all come out. There is a ceremony that will happen, they will cook some halwa. So halwa making ceremony is present. In this they will make halwa. This has been going on since many years, but recently there was a proposal that they will make khichdi also along with halwa, because government of India felt that khichdi should be declared as a national dish, because they said every state will cook some form of khichdi. They said Tamil Nadu cooks pongal, Karnataka cooks bisibelebath, and everything is like some sort of khichdi only. But Tamil Nadu government opposed this vehemently. They said pongal is not khichdi, and after this they felt it is not a good idea to, you can say, create another dispute with regard to between center and states, and they dropped that idea of cooking pongal. But as of now they are continuing this old tradition of, you can say, halwa making ceremony. After that they will bring this, you can say, budget. That means Nirmala Sitharaman will bring the budget documents in that red bag. Along with that, all these demands for grants that have been filled up by all the departments and ministries, they will pack them in green bags and seal them before bringing them out of the ministry. They will load them into 3 trucks and they will bring all these documents also to the parliament, so that if any parliamentarians wants to open and read this, then they will do it. Nobody has ever opened anything, but just, you can say, just in case if they want to open and read it. So they will bring it and they will park it in front of parliament, and then this budget speech will begin. In budget speech you would have seen basically every finance minister, depending upon, I mean it doesn't matter which party, they will read the entire speech in most of the cases. So once the speech is entirely read, it will take maybe sometimes 1 hour, 2 hours, 2.5 hours also. Once the speech is read, on that day usually detailed discussion of the budget is not allowed in parliament, only a general discussion of budget is allowed. Most people in the parliament are old, they are, you can say, they will not be able to, they will not be able to focus, even you can say UPSC aspirants are not able to focus for 3 hours. So that means you can see people in their 60s and 70s won't be able to sit for long hours and listen to the budget speech. So most of them, you can say, some of them are sleeping and suddenly they will wake up after the budget speech is over. Once it is over, after every budget speech, same comments will be heard regardless of who is in power. They will say this budget is anti-farmer and anti-poor. So that means some people will say this is anti-farmer. They will say you have reduced money for some welfare scheme, everybody would have reduced money so that it will be spent on something else. So they will just say, you can say these type of comments are given by opposition parties in general about the budget. Whoever is in power, it doesn't matter, the same comment will be there by opposition party. These are all common things that will happen on the, you can say, first day after budget speech. After this speech is over, then in the parliament they have to pass demand for grants. Each of the demand for grant has to be taken up and discussed, and you can say what this particular department is asking, why it is asking this much of money, whether it is, you can say, going to help people in some manner or not. So this sort of discussion, ideally it should happen. But because so many departments are present, it is very difficult to do this sort of discussion on every departmental, you can say, matter. So usually they will choose, parliament will choose some, 5%, 10% of actual demand for grants which are politically sensitive, where there is some dispute. Where there is no dispute, there is no need to take up and discuss that part. Both our parties agree that we have to give this much money to ISRO. So there is no dispute usually on this part. Some other aspect there will be a dispute if MG Naraga budget has been reduced by a ministry, or something else, COVID related budget has not been enough, or something like this which is politically disputed. This sort of point is discussed. So after this discussion is over, they will pass demands for grants. Passing of demands for grants is done through a resolution in parliament. What is the meaning of a resolution? Resolution of the house is not the same as bill. Resolution means just passing the opinion of the house. By simple majority, if they vote saying we approve this demand for grant, that means the opinion, in the opinion of the house, it is a good demand for grant and there is no problem with it, and then it is considered to be passed. You understood this? So this way they will take up some demands for grants and they will discuss about them and they will pass them. Then after they get tired, still 90% of demand for grants are still remaining, then what they will do is they have done only 10%, remaining 90% they will do something called as gulation. You would have studied in polity. Gulation means they will put all this, you can say, all the demand for grants to vote at once, and they will say we want to pass everything at once, because they no longer want to discuss all the remaining parts, so they will just say they will pass everything at once. So this gulation will happen. Gulation is actually a machine. In French Revolution they used to cut heads of people who were opposing government or something. That means during all the revolutionaries people who were later, when revolutionaries came to power, monarchs and such others. So same way here we will put everybody, line up all the, you can say, all the demand for grants and pass everything at once. So that is called as, you can say, gulation here. You understood this? After this, imagine gulation is over. So because of this demand for grants not being discussed, 90% of them were not being discussed, we wanted to find a solution to this problem. In parliament, so we created a solution, we call it as department related standing committees. Entire parliament, if they have to take one by one demand for grants and discuss each and every one of them in detail, then it will take more than a year to discuss the budget itself. Because of this reason, what we have done is, we have divided parliament into different department related standing committees. What they will do is, they will take up, each department related standing committee takes different demand for grant and they will do study of that particular demand for grant. They can even summon the respective head of the department and someone, and they can ask questions on why you want this much money, etc. They will give some PowerPoint presentation to this committee, etc. Once the entire thing is over, the committee will give a recommendation that you can accept this demand for grant, or you can, then some problem is present in this demand for grant. Because of this reason, we have improved, you can say, this whole process of budget. Earlier 90% of demand for grant nobody used to read, but now at least you can say 50-60% we are able to cover, at least, even though entire parliament is not able to look at them. Wherever there is a problem anyway, they will recommend it for discussion in the entire parliament, and that means we can prioritize important ones and they will be able to discuss those demands for grants in the parliament. You understood this? So this is called as department related standing committee. For every department there is a standing committee in the parliament. You understood this? Once this whole demand for grants are passed, after this appropriation bill and finance bill has to be passed. It is actually the appropriation bill and finance bill which is considered to be the budget. So far it is only opinion of the house, that in the house's opinion this budget is okay. But if they don't pass appropriation bill, finance bill, They are money bills. If they are unable to pass a money bill, then what do you think will happen? Government is losing its majority. Government has to, you can say, resign. Prime Minister has to resign and they will go for a new government in case they are unable to pass a money bill. It is treated as no confidence on government if they are unable to pass a money bill. Because of this reason, they will take these money bills very seriously and they will make sure everybody will vote properly and they will, you can say, pass these bills. In India, we have, in 10th schedule, you would have studied 92nd amendment, we introduced anti-defection law. Everybody would have studied anti-defection law. Anti-defection means, so party will have a post called as party whip. Whip means what? Whip means somebody who regulates the members' behavior. Whip, like for example, symbolically whip is something which regulates cattle behavior by, so something similar here. Whip is somebody who regulates the behavior of all the members of the party. So majority whip, minority whip, both parties will have their own whip. Then what happens is, imagine majority whip, I think now Amit Shah, Home Minister, is majority whip. I don't remember, Mallikarjun Kharge I think is minority whip, I am not sure, but so think of this as, you can say, if the bill comes to, you can say, they present this bill, then they have to say yes or no whether you agree to this bill or not. In India we follow the same. In UK Parliament they will say aye or nay. Same thing we will follow in Indian Parliament also. It is a colonial legacy. Everybody who is in favor of the bill say aye, this is what speaker will say. Then everybody of ruling party will say aye, because imagine Amit Shah tells everybody, see, I will say aye, everybody say aye, nothing else. That means basically, so once Home Minister says this, everybody, because he is party whip. If they don't say it, what happens according to anti-defection law? They can be disqualified from the party. That means they will lose their MP seat also. So because of anti-defection law, what has happened is, you can say, there is no individual opinion that you can express. There is only one party opinion. Individual democracy has been curtailed. Only, you can say, within the party you can discuss. Where you stand on any issue in parliament is dependent on where you sit. That means, if you sit on the treasury benches, that means on government side, you stand on whatever government's opinion is. You cannot express your own opinion separately. You understood this? So this is basically anti-defection law. Because of anti-defection law, every time they will usually pass this budget easily. How is budget passed? Earlier we just discussed before break that usually government first decides how much money to spend and then it will decide how much money to raise. How much money to spend is decided by appropriation bill. So first appropriation bill is passed and then only they will move on to finance bill. Appropriation means allotting money to appropriate purposes is called as appropriation. That is why it is called as appropriation. So that means they have already decided we are going to spend 40 lakh crores. How to divide this money into all the departments and ministries appropriately. So that is an appropriation bill, they would have listed out everything. And once this appropriation is, you can say, it has to be passed. Probably you would have studied in polity how a bill is passed. Usually a money bill means a president has to recommend this in parliament, and so once recommendation happens first in Lok Sabha, then in Lok Sabha first reading of the bill will happen, then only title and major goal of this bill is discussed. Second reading, clause by clause discussion will happen about all the things in the bill. In the third reading, generally opinion of the house is discussed and then finally it is put to vote. So this is first, second, third reading. Same thing, once in Lok Sabha it is, imagine when it is put to vote, like I said, because of anti-defection law everybody says aye and it is passed. Once it is passed, then it will move to Rajya Sabha. In Rajya Sabha also it will be introduced and then same process, first reading, second reading, third reading will happen. Then it will be put to vote and if enough people say aye, it is passed. Once it is passed, then it will be sent to president and president has to sign on this bill. Once the president's signature is done, then it is considered to be passed. Similarly, exact same procedure will happen for finance bill. Finance bill, what means, how much money, how we are going to raise this money. We will create new taxes. Maybe last year there was already a tax, we increased it or reduced it, we changed it, we abolished the tax. Anything, whatever will come under this, you can say is finance bill. How to raise this much money? Maybe we will sell some bit of government land we will create extra tax, we will take some loans, we will sell government shares, disinvestment, something else, whatever we do, it will be mentioned in finance bill. By doing all this, we will raise this much money. That is what is present in finance bill. And finance bill also is a money bill, because that means president will introduce it and then they will go through first, second, third reading and pass it in Lok Sabha and then pass it in Rajya Sabha, then goes to president. Once president signs on both these bills, then only you can say budget is considered to be passed. So once the president has signed it, after that only money is available for government to be spent. If before president signs on the bill, if money is being spent by government, it is treated as illegal. It will be, you can say, punishable. You understood this? Once president has signed this, then money is available for government. Then what government will do? It will go to finance ministry. Finance ministry will say, this much money we are all allotting to all the heads of departments. So it will go to respective departments and respective ministries, departments, head of department will get that budget for that ministry. So HODs will control that budget and they will be able to, you can say, give to each scheme and sub scheme within that particular ministry and department. You understood this? So once this budget is allotted, imagine once a department gets the money, it has decided some, you can say, we are going to spend 1000 crores in this year. For that department, 1000 crore, you can say, was allotted. If they are unable to spend that much money in that year, what do you think will happen? Imagine 500 crores they spent, it's still 500 crore is still remaining. Then what happens to this money? It goes back into Parliament's hands, because ultimately who is the custodian of public purse? It is Parliament. If they don't finish the money by, you can say, end of that year, then it will lapse back to Parliament. This is called as rule of lapse. Rule of lapse means LAPSE. Lapsing means it will fall back to Parliament, because Parliament has given this money with a clear condition that you have to spend it this much money for this purpose within this date. And because now this date condition has not been satisfied, within that date they did not spend the money, that money goes back to Parliament. Then when it goes back to Parliament, again in the next year's budget they have to explain why you did not spend this money, and then again they have to request the Parliament and then they have to give. So to avoid any uncomfortable questions, and also one more problem is, imagine this department asked for 1000 crores but it was capable of spending only 500 crores. Next year if the department asks for 1200 crores, they will ask, you could not even spend 1000 crores itself last year, why we should give this much? So every departmental head, they will think that somehow we have to increase how much money we are getting. If you have to increase it, then we have to spend this money immediately. So usually if they have not been able to spend throughout the year, there is March 31st the financial year end will happen. So before that 31st they have to spend all the money. So then what happens is, in month of March in newspaper you will see so many tenders everywhere that they are trying to spend all the money at once. This is called as March rush in Indian economy. March rush means government entirely runs and tries to spend as much money as possibly as in March, because they have to show zero balance by the end of 31st of March. Then only they will not ask any questions on why you did not spend this money. But if they are trying to spend 1 year's worth of money in 1 month, will it be very efficient, or it won't be efficient. So they will lay roads where already road is present. So that means they will collapse some buildings, build again or something. So that means because they are unable to do, you can say, efficiently, it is not good for public interest. So that means we wanted to increase efficiency in this. Internally, what government has done is it has introduced some software called as Public Finance Management System. This Public Finance Management System, what it does is, it will not allot entire 1000 crores to the department first. In the first quarter, it will allot only 250 crores. Then they have to spend this 250 crores by the end of that quarter. If they don't spend it, then the superior in that ministry for this department, they will ask why you were not able to spend 250 crores. You understood? That means internally we have created some level of accountability to spend the money properly. Because of this, their money will be divided among 4 quarters. Parliament has nothing to do with this, but internally within the government we have created this sort of a mechanism. So earlier March rush used to happen, now 4 separate rushes will happen at the end of every quarter, but it is slightly better. compared to March rush where they are trying to spend all the money at once. You understood this? So, they are demanding more money because if they control more money, you can say there is more power and respect in bureaucracy. But spending money requires work. That means you have to follow a lot of laws and sign a lot of files and follow a lot of procedures. So sometimes when they are slow, they will not be able to complete the project within time and they will not be able to spend the money. Money will still be remaining sometimes. You understood? There is not enough pressure on them. Overall Indian bureaucracy at higher levels, it is overburdened. Too much work is present already. And along with that, you can say, if you want to follow all the procedures rules for every single file and follow this and spend it, then sometimes there will be delays. You understood this? It is not that they don't want to spend it. They are unable to spend it within that time period. That means it will lapse back. You understood the problem of rule of lapse and March rush. We implemented this solution PFMS within the executive itself. PFMS, it has nothing to do with legislature. Within the executive, we are trying to increase efficiency of spending properly. You understood? Any questions so far? So, here, because bureaucracy is overburdened, imagine 100 things are there to be done. Sometimes what happens is, politicians will put pressure on them to implement some scheme properly, because for that politician this is the vote bank, and if that scheme is not implemented properly, they will not vote for them. Some, you can say, community leader will be putting pressure on the politician to get that scheme implemented, allot these things to the beneficiaries, etc. So politician will put pressure on the officer will do it. Those people who are powerless in society, maybe poorer sections, differently abled, or maybe it is minorities, some weaker sections, they don't have enough numbers to be able to put pressure on any politician and politician putting pressure on them. So for them, they will sometimes get neglected. So it used to happen that the most of the money that was lapsed back to parliament is actually related to the schemes of vulnerable sections. Imagine differently abled. Nobody is representing them properly in parliament. No politician is putting pressure on officers to spend money properly on their schemes. Women related scheme, Nirbhaya fund 1000 crores was not spent for entire 2 years, not a single rupee was spent. They did not know what to do with it, not enough women was there as politicians and nobody is putting pressure on them. So for women, for weaker sections, for similarly even minority funds, they were not spending much money on them. Because of this reason, government came up with a solution. This is a normal problem in democracy. In democracy in general, whoever is majority, their will prevail. That means they will be able to put pressure on whoever is their government. Government will put pressure on the bureaucracy. Bureaucracy will serve them. But there will be some other section of population which will be left out. They are powerless. Because of various reasons like this. Because they don't have enough numbers to actually, you can say, act as a single group which can elect some politicians which will represent them. You understood this? So this is an inherent, you can say, limitation of democracy. And because of this reason, we have to build some mechanisms to make sure that this limitation will not cripple the democracy. It will not create any serious negative impacts on the democracy. So what we have done is, even though rule of lapse is present, we identified that in some areas rule of lapse will do more harm than good. Even though rule of lapse is created to maintain accountability of parliament, we have given some exceptions to this rule of lapse. If money is given for some vulnerable section, like for example, tribes, so there is a, tribal schemes are present. Once money is given to them, it will not lapse back to parliament. That means maybe it will slow, but officials will come around to it and they will implement it. If it keeps on lapsing back to parliament, then you can say they will be starved of funds. You understood? So we have given exceptions to some of them. Non-lapsable fund, you will see in schemes document for some particular type of schemes. So those are called as non-lapsable funds, means rule of lapse will not apply for non-lapsable funds. Why we have given exception is because those funds, like I said, they are from vulnerable sections and not properly represented by normal democratic processes. Because of this reason, we need to treat them, you can say, separately. Treating unequal is a part of equity. You understood this? So that is why we have given exception to this rule of lapse. For tribes, for women related schemes, children related schemes, they are also not represented. So these type of schemes, some of them we have given exceptions, and that is, you can say, non-lapsable fund. You understood so far how this whole process works. Then after the budget is over, usually accounts are filled up. Accounts books means how much money we spent where. Then these accounts books are sent to CAG. CAG is Comptroller and Auditor General. They will do auditing. Once auditing is done, these reports are presented to government. Then government will add action taken report along with, auditor would have written different lot of paragraphs. Against each para what they have done as an action to resolve this problem, they would write. And after they write this action taken report, they will present it to Parliament. And in the Parliament there will be discussion that will happen on this CAG report. You understood this? This is the whole process from beginning to end. Once that discussion is over, then we can consider the, you can say, the whole long process to be complete. This is how, you can say, budgetary process happens. Everybody understood what is this whole process? Any questions in budgetary process? So, this is the process, and in the Parliament, in the Constitution actually they have given some rules that some documents are mandatorily, necessary to be presented in the budget to the Parliament. Parliament means they are representatives of people. On behalf of people, they will ask questions to government. So once they present all these documents, Parliament will read these documents and hold the government accountable. This is the whole, you can say, picture. This checks and balances is working like this one. So first is annual financial statement. We already saw Article 112. It comprises receipts and expenditures of government for the current year, previous year, budget year in 3 parts. We already saw 3 years data. Next year's budget year means next year. For that we have estimates. For current year, what do we have? Current year revised estimates, or previous year we have actuals. So these 3 data we will have for 3 separate accounts: Consolidated Fund of India, Contingency Fund of India, and Public Account of India. Majority of government money actually goes only to Consolidated Fund of India. In fact, almost all the money that government spends is actually going to Consolidated Fund and coming out of Consolidated Fund of India. Contingency Fund of India is only for emergencies, some minimum amount of money. Some earlier 500 crores was there, now some 30,000 crores. So this will be available with Finance Secretary. That means even without the permission of any cabinet minister or ministers at all, when there is a serious crisis, Finance Secretary can approve spending of this money, because here speed is more important rather than who is taking the decision. Immediate decision has to be taken to be able to save people. Maybe some disaster or some sort of situation has arisen. That is why this contingency fund is given. For adding money to Contingency Fund of India, Parliament will not ask, you can say, reasons in the beginning. If you spend it, they will ask later to refill that money, why you spent it, where you spent it, how you spent it. That means it is post facto accountability. Once the money is spent, then you have to explain to Parliament where, why, how you spent. You understood this? So this is Contingency Fund of India. Then Public Account of India. If you remember earlier, we had discussed about small savings schemes, where government directly takes loans from people, maybe through post office deposits, recurring deposit, fixed deposit in post office. It will sell Kisan Vikas Patra. Under Sukanya Samruddhi Yojana, it will take deposits for so many years. So all these type of money that goes to government, they are all liabilities to government. Why are we calling them as liabilities? Later they have to pay it back to people, and they have to pay interest on this money also. We can treat them as some sort of liability. All these type of liabilities, we keep it in a separate account, which we call as Public Account of India. Usually we can use this money, but later we have to anyway, it can be treated somewhat like a loan. Government sometimes uses this money. When it does not need this money, it will invest this money somewhere, tries to get some returns. What it wants to do is left to government, but overall, mostly liabilities are kept in Public Account of India. You understood this? So these are the 3 funds. Most of the money that we are discussing in general is coming from actually Consolidated Fund only. Other 2 are, you can say, not huge amount of money, it is relatively less. and therefore, like I said, mostly liabilities will come under public account, and very minimal amount of emergency fund will come under this contingency fund of India. So then demands for grants we just saw, estimates of expenditures are present to Lok Sabha in the form of these demands for grants. So whatever forms they fill up, they will be presented, you can say, to Lok Sabha. Then appropriation bill, finance bill also we just saw. First appropriation bill is passed, after that you can say finance bill is passed. Appropriation bill, article 114 clause 3 stipulates no amount can be withdrawn from consolidated fund of India without enactment of a law by parliament. That means if parliament does not approve, then you cannot withdraw the money. Why? Same reason whatever we saw. Who is the custodian of public purse? Is parliament. If parliament does not give permission, then executive cannot use this money. That is the philosophy behind this overall article. Why they have created article like this? Because we have designed the system in such a way that you can say checks and balances will be ensured. That is, you can say, the reason why. Then finance bill, it is presented to enact law, article 110A, enact a law for imposition, abolition, remission, alteration, regulation of taxes. That means if you want to create a new tax, remove an existing tax, reduce the tax, alteration means change the rules related to the tax. Anything you want to do with regard to taxes, then it will happen through finance bill. A finance bill is a money bill as defined in article 110 of the constitution. So there are, in polity you would have studied 4 types of bills are present: ordinary, constitutional amendment bill, finance bill and ordinary bill. I mean, there is finance bill 1 and finance bill 2, so you can think of those two as separate. So here you can see this finance bill here, it is actually you can say representing a philosophy of American Revolution. In world history you will read about American Revolution. America had 13 colonies of UK. All these colonies fought a war against UK and they won independence. Why did they fight a war? Because UK was taxing them, but it did not have any members, representation was not there from there in UK's parliament. So they said either you have to have some members represented from here in parliament, because our issues are not even getting discussed in parliament, or you should not tax us. So they raised a slogan at that time in American Revolution, which is no taxation without representation. That means there should be representation in parliament from that colony, then only parliament can tax that colony. Same thing is there here. If parliament approves the tax and there is representation from that particular area in parliament, then only the tax is valid, otherwise the tax is not valid. You understood? There was a question in UPSC exam. This no taxation without representation as a philosophy in Indian constitution is present in which article? And it is, you can say, this finance bill. So they have linked together two things, two subjects, from world history to polity. You understood this? So this sort of conceptual depth and understanding is expected by UPSC. They are not expecting you to remember exactly rote memorization of which 110A or 114 class 3 or something. That will not help to clear exam, you can say, much. Maybe after you have conceptual clarity, to differentiate with other extremely good students, to be able to get maybe extra half mark, it may help. But like I said, using only factual knowledge you cannot clear the exam. You understood? So these are, you can say, documents mandated by the constitution. 4 documents are mandatory according to the constitution. They have to present all these documents, you can say, in parliament. Then structure of the budget. In the budget there are 2 parts, receipts and expenditure. Very simple. Receipts means what? Government receives revenue, that is why it is called receipt. Receipt means receiving. Government has received something, that is why it is called receipt. Expenditure means government is spending. So government, if it is spending money, it is called expenditure. Receiving money, it is called as receipts. You can draw some sort of a tree here. Under receipts, you can say we have revenue receipts, capital receipts. So similarly, under revenue receipts we have non-tax revenue, tax revenue. You can split it and write, you can say like this, so that everything is at one place and you can easily get the bigger picture. So in the first page or somewhere you can write it like this. Now coming to first one, that is receipts. Receipts means government is receiving money here, that is why we are calling it as receipts. First is revenue and capital. Revenue receipts means, earlier we have seen the meaning of assets and liabilities. We saw it from bank's perspective. Similar to a bank, from everybody's perspective, asset is something which will give them money. That means, imagine you are getting returns from something, then it is called asset. If you are losing money because of something, it is called liability. If your assets or liabilities are going to change, imagine from a family's perspective, you are going to buy an extra house, that is an asset or you can say liability. You are going to buy an extra house which you can give on rent, that means it may give you returns, that means it will be a asset. Imagine you take a new loan, it is an asset or a liability? It is a liability because you have to pay EMI, that will actually reduce your money. So, when you have new assets or new liabilities are created, then that will come under capital. Imagine you are receiving something, that means capital receipt means you take a new loan, means you receive the money, but it is a liability. Your liabilities have increased, then it is capital receipt. Or imagine you sell an existing asset, you had a second house, you sold it, then also you will receive the money, but it is capital receipt because your assets or liabilities have changed or not. Your house is now, asset was there, now asset has reduced. Either asset will reduce and you will sell that asset, receive money, or liabilities will increase, you take a loan and you receive money. Then both of them will come under capital receipts. You understood this? Because it is like a lump sum amount of money you will receive at once. Imagine you take 1 crore loan, will they give every month 1 crore or only once? Only once they will give 1 crore. After that you have to pay them EMI. Imagine you sell your land or something, they will give, imagine 2 crores for land. Will they give every time? Only once they will give. Only once. Now the land will belong to them. If you want to use the same land also you have to pay rent or something. That means this capital receipts you will receive is a one-time payment that you will get. Either the loan amount that you get and the loans will increase, or you sell your assets and your assets will reduce, then we call it as capital receipts. You understood this? So, revenue receipts means assets and liabilities are not affected. Imagine you get salary, every month salary is credited into the account. Imagine you are getting 1 lakh every month. It is not affecting your assets also, it is not affecting your liabilities also. It is just added into the account because you are working. That is a regular income you are receiving. That is called as revenue receipt. You understood this? Now consider from government's perspective. People are regularly every month they are paying GST or tax or something. What type of receipt is it? It is revenue receipt because it is a regular income for government. Imagine government takes a loan from World Bank. What type of receipt will it be? It will be capital receipt. Imagine central government had given a loan earlier to Karnataka government. Now Karnataka government is paying regular monthly interest to central government. From central government's perspective, monthly interest received is what type of receipt? It is revenue receipt. Because interest is not changing any asset or liability. The loan that they had, you can say, given from Karnataka government's perspective, taking of this loan, what type of receipt is it? It is capital receipt. You understood this? Whether something is a capital receipt or not is dependent upon whether it is affecting their assets or liabilities or not. You understood what is the meaning of revenue and capital receipts here? So, usually revenue receipts are regular and recurring, again and again they will keep on coming, and capital receipts are only one time. Now if you read it you will understand easily. Revenue receipts, current income received from all sources such as taxes, profits of public enterprises. For example, imagine Government of India owns Indian Oil Corporation or some other PSU which is making profits. If it makes profits, the owner is government. These profits are shared with government, whoever is the owner, shareholders. So that is also regular profits that they are sharing with the government. That is also regular income. That is revenue receipt. Then grants. Sometimes state governments will receive grants regularly from central government. That will not affect any liability. Grant means it is not like a loan they are giving, they are just giving the money to them. So that means these grants also are revenue receipts for state government. You understood? Imagine instead of grant they will give a loan. What type of receipt will it be? Then it will become capital receipt because it has created a liability. Revenue receipts neither create any liability nor cause any reduction in the assets of the government. Then we call it as revenue receipt. You understood? Capital receipt, they either create a liability or cause any reduction in the assets of the government. Example, borrowing. Recovery of a loan. Imagine Karnataka government pays back this loan to central government. Then what type of receipt is it? It is capital receipt. Why is it capital receipt? What did it affect? From central government's perspective, what was this loan? Central government had given a loan to state government. Now it has received it back. Received it back. It will come under revenue receipt or capital receipt? Why it will come under capital receipt? When they had given this loan to Karnataka government, it was an asset or liability? It was an asset. Why it was an asset? Because Karnataka government was giving returns continuously or not. Anything that will give returns is an asset. For central government, it used to be an asset. Now, when the Karnataka government pays back this loan, it is equivalent to selling the asset, or you can say the asset no longer exists. The money has been received. You understood? When the asset disappears and money is received, what type of receipt is it? It is capital receipt. You understood? That is why even you can say recovery of a loan by government is also part of capital receipt. Once only you will recover the loan, again and again they will not pay the same loan. That means it is also one time payment, it will come under capital receipts. So, disinvestment. Disinvestment means selling government's assets. Like for example, government owns shares. Imagine it owned Air India. We sold Air India. Now government received lump sum, huge amount of money. That will come under which receipt? Capital receipt, because Air India shares were assets and they were sold. So that is capital receipt. You understood the difference between revenue receipts and capital receipts. Any questions so far? Yeah. Okay, so public enterprises may try to keep some money for themselves for reinvestment in next year. So usually any company, earlier we had discussed how corporate governance structure works. There are shareholders. In PSUs, government is the shareholder. In other companies, many shareholders may be there. Then board of directors, then there is CEO or management. What they will usually do is, management in discussion with the board, they will decide, imagine totally 1000 crore profit they have received this year. Then management and they will decide how much has to be given to shareholders. As a part of this, usually they will split it into two parts. First is dividend. Dividend means whatever is shared as a part of the profit. Imagine 500 crore is shared with shareholders. That is called as dividend. Remaining 500 crore will be called as reinvested earnings, RE. Reinvested earnings means what? Or retained earnings. They have retained it with the bank or the company itself, PSU itself. What will they do with it? They can expand the business further. They can, you can say, buy more raw material, produce more things. So usually profit means they will not share the entire profit with shareholder. They will split it into two parts: retained earnings and dividend. Dividend means that part of profit which is actually received by the shareholders. Retained earning means that part which will actually remain with the company itself so that they can expand their business. You understood this? So, under receipts, we saw revenue receipts and capital receipts. Now, coming to revenue receipts, as a part of this revenue receipt, we have non-tax revenue and tax revenue. Non-tax revenue means, for government, major revenue is actually tax revenue, but other than tax revenue, other types of revenue may also be there. Commercial revenue, administrative revenue are parts of this two types of, you can say, this non-tax revenue. Commercial revenue means government is selling some product or service to people, and you can say because of selling of this product or service, government is receiving some money. For example, you can buy some railway ticket. When you buy this ticket, can you consider this ticket price as tax? It is not exactly tax. Why it is not tax? Because everybody is not paying it, only people who are using this train, getting on this train, they are paying it. That means it is a service. Imagine you are getting on a private bus also, then you buy the ticket. Same way you on government bus also you buy the ticket. That means you can see user is paying it. It is actually a charge for the service that they are charging. That is commercial relationship between government and the citizen. I am providing you a service. You are giving me a money for that particular service. the money given is proportional to that service. That means somehow there is a relationship between, okay, bus ticket from here to some other place is 100 rupees. There is a proportion here. They cannot charge 10,000 rupees for that ticket when the market price is around this much. Maybe they will charge little low or little high. That means proportion is present. Some sort of relationship is present. Then you can consider it as commercial revenue. This money received is because of selling of some services. Air India used to sell tickets, and similarly here also you can say for using a road you pay toll. That is also commercial revenue because you are using this service and you are paying money to government. You understood? It is like renting the road for the time period that you are using it. So that is like a rental is like a service, and then you are using it, you are paying money. So government, wherever it sells some service and charges money, all these are commercial revenue. You understood this? So people pay for electricity. Electricity we are buying and we are using it. That is also commercial revenue. For services of railways, postal stamps, toll on roads, all these are examples of commercial revenue. It is received by government in the form of prices paid by people for goods and services that government provides. Like I said, wherever we can establish a buyer-seller relationship, then it is commercial revenue. If we have to establish a buyer-seller relationship, there has to be proportion between the product that is bought and money that is paid. You understood this? When you buy more products, you have to pay more money. When you buy less products, you have to pay less money. Then there is a proportion, and then there is a buyer-seller relationship. Administrative revenue means there is no buyer-seller relationship. Government will collect some money, but it is not exactly a seller of service. It is just collecting for administrative convenience. Imagine you are riding without helmet and traffic police will ask for a fine. It does not mean he is trying to sell you something. There is no buyer-seller relationship in penalty collected by government. You understood this? Similarly, imagine you go to Passport Seva Kendra, they will say you have to pay passport fee of something. Does it mean they are selling passports? No, it is just an administrative fee collected by government. So court fees, court is not selling you any justice or something, you are just paying for administrative revenue. In many of these cases, actually, if it is not possible for somebody to pay, one officer will be responsible, they have a discretion to waive off this fee also. That means some officer in bureaucracy has enough power to waive this fee because it is not exactly a commercial relationship here. You understood this? So without taking the fee also they can give it. Similar thing for government schools, children are paying some fee. The fee will be compared to very less compared to the services they are offering. There is no proportion. It is just for the upkeep of the school, some extra support is received from parents of the children. Same thing in government hospitals. They will usually charge some 100 rupee or something, one time fee, you take the same card again and again. Meet doctor every time, you don't need to pay consultation fee there. That means you can see there is no proportion between the services offered there. Sometimes doctor you will take bigger services from hospital but they will not charge extra. Some other person will take smaller service. That means you can see there is no proportion between the services being offered and the charge that they are actually doing for this person. And it is possible for some officer in the hospital to waive off this fee also. In the school also headmaster can waive the fee or something. So they would have created rules like this where this fee is collected only for extra support of governance of this entire institution, not like a sale of some service. Then government has classified some things by itself clearly as administrative revenue, and those are all examples of administrative revenue. It arises on account of administrative services of government. Fees in the form of passport fee, government hospital fee, education fee, court fee, fines and penalties on lawbreakers for disobeying rules, regulations, etc. You understood this? All these are examples for administrative revenue. So we cannot easily draw a line between what is commercial revenue, administrative revenue everywhere, because we have to identify whether it is proportional service. So that is why government itself has clearly defined what will come under administrative revenue, what will come under commercial revenue. You understood? In recent times, after 91 reforms, we are moving more and more towards commercial revenue from administrative revenue. That means we are actually starting to charge what exactly is the market price of some product or service on all the people. For example, increased toll collection we saw because of TOT model or asset monetization, etc. Same thing is happening in every aspect. User fees, user charges, just like private sector will charge for everything, same thing government is also trying to do. This is a trend in government, more movement towards commercial revenue compared to administrative revenue. You understood this? So, even recently in railways, they are trying to raise revenue other than from ticket sales, because railways is running under loss and they are trying to find every way of raising revenue. So, through advertisements they are raising revenue. You might have seen on top of railways everywhere they have posted posters. At the back of every seat they would have some Byju's or Paytm or something will be there. So, that means all these are ad revenue received by, you can say, Indian Railways. That is also commercial revenue, because these companies are paying for, you can say, this ad space. Imagine railways will give a stall on rent to someone so that they will make tea or something. That is also commercial revenue, because they have rented out a space and they are earning money. You understood this? All these are examples of commercial and administrative revenue. So, then so far we have seen non-tax revenue. Next is tax revenue. Tax revenue we will actually see in detail. Taxation is important tool of fiscal policy, so we will take detailed discussion of taxation. But here I have just given example. Direct tax example is corporate tax, income tax. Indirect tax example is GST. So this is basically tax revenue. In revenue receipts we saw two types. One is non-tax revenue and tax revenue. In non-tax revenue we saw commercial revenue, administrative revenue. In tax revenue we saw direct tax, indirect tax, and this is under revenue. Other than revenue receipt, next is capital receipt. In capital receipt, if you sell assets, then you will receive money, that is called as disinvestment usually. Investment means what? Buying some assets so that you get returns. If you sell assets, that is what is, you can say, in simple manner you can think of it as opposite of selling assets is, buying assets is selling assets. Opposite of investment is disinvestment. Government I would have sold some assets, that is what we are calling as disinvestment. Disinvestment also we will see in detail. So along with that, public debt also is capital receipt. Government takes a loan. That loan will create what? It creates a liability. Because loan is creating a liability, we can consider it as capital receipt. But why does government have to take a loan? It can decide how much tax people have to pay and it can just declare it and people still have to finally pay it. So why should it take loans? So earlier we had seen long back that government's incomes are irregular, where expenditure is regular. Expenditure is regular means every month it has to spend money or not. It has to spend money on maintenance of infrastructure, roads, railways, hospitals, schools. It has to pay salaries for all government employees. It has to pay salaries for a standing army of 10-15 lakh soldiers. So that means you can see it has to keep on spending monthly expenditure, but it does not get, monthly revenue. Maybe some aspects are there where it will get monthly, but major amount of its income will come once in a year, twice in a year or something. Because they have to manage this gap between when they will receive money, when they will spend money. Sometimes they will take loans for 90 days, you can say half a year, 1 year. So majority of the loans are small term loans. Some loans they will take for different purposes which are long term loans. You understood this? One major reason is mismatch between, you can say, timing of income and expenditure. That is what we just saw. But there are other reasons also. The objectives of public debt to bridge the budget deficit. That means we will see about deficits also. Budget deficit means government is spending 40 lakh crore, but it is able to raise only, imagine, 38 lakh crore. Then what it will do is 2 lakh crore it will take as a loan. First it has already decided that it will spend 40 lakh crore. Then it tried everything and it was able to raise only 38 lakh crore as income. Then they will take 2 lakh crore loan and they will just spend that money. You understood this? So this bridging the budget deficit, financing of the deficit. Then fighting against depression. Imagine when depression or recession is happening in the economy, at this point, who should spend more money? Government should. People are not spending money, they are not. We saw, if you have to increase demand, it is finally falls upon the shoulders of government to take this responsibility and get the economy out of this depression. Monetary policy is also not working because of what? Because of liquidity trap. Monetary policy is also not working, only fiscal policy will work. If fiscal policy has to work, what type of policy do they have to follow? Expansionary fiscal policy. To follow expansionary fiscal policy, what should they do to tax? Reduce tax. What should they do to expenditure? Increase expenditure. But how can they increase expenditure without increasing tax? They have to reduce tax. That means there is a gap between the two. They have to, you can say, spend extra money now, and they cannot tax people. The only option left is taking a loan. You understood this? So that is why to fight depression or recession in expansionary fiscal policy, usually government takes loan, because the other alternative tax is not viable option now. Because if we try to tax more, then it will become contractionary policy, not expansionary policy. You understood this? So fighting against depression. Then sometimes to check inflation also government can take loans. Every time it will not use this, you can say. Earlier we have seen market stabilization scheme bonds. They sold the market stabilization scheme bonds, took the money, and it was kept in a separate account without giving it to government. Government did not spend this money. Earlier we had discussed it as a part of monetary policy. That is one example where government takes a loan but does not spend it. If it takes a loan, the money is moving away from economy. People have less money in the economy. That means what happens to demand? Demand reduces. So this money has been taken out because demand has been reduced. What happens to inflation? It will reduce. So this way, sometimes it is possible for government to take loans and not spend it so that they can control inflation. If RBI is unable to control inflation for some reason, then government has this possibility of, usually they will not do like this, but it is like a extraordinary times they can use this sort of a situation, this sort of, you can say, loans to control inflation. Then financing economic development. This is simple. If you have to do more development, then you can say usually we will take a little bit of extra loan and we will spend that money. It is similar to why businesses are taking loans. For example, imagine a business is earning some 25-30% profit per year. If they take a loan interest rate is some 10%. Imagine they will invest in extra 10 crores into the business, and on that extra 10 crores they will earn 30%, you can say, returns. Is it a good idea to take loan at 10% or not? Yes, because if they take a loan, even if they pay back 10%, they will still remain with 20% more profit. So that means their business will keep on expanding and they will continue to make profits. Exactly same thing will be done by government. Government will take a loan and invest that in the economy. Invest in the economy means build roads and hospitals and schools and such. After it invests in the economy, what happens is, in the economy, because extra road is built, what happens to both demand supply? It will increase. We saw infrastructure and such investment will actually improve economic growth. As growth increases, more production services are produced or not? And in India, do we have tax on every product or service or not? If more production services are produced, what happens to tax collection of government? It increases. Using these extra taxes collected, government can pay back the loan. Sometimes it can remain with even more money also. Just like how private sector is trying to make profit by taking a loan, investing it, same thing government will do. It will take a loan, invest in the economy. As economic activity increases, it will collect more tax, because tax rate is same, more product means more tax. You understood? Imagine 18% GST, more services are sold, more products are sold, 18 more, for every extra product produced, extra collection of money will happen. All this tax that they collect is extra income to government. They can pay back their loans and interest, and you can say sometimes even make profit there also. So they will finance. On one side it is good for economy because development is happening. On the other side it is good for government also. It is maybe even making a profit. You understood this? So this is financing economic development. Then meeting unforeseen contingencies. Unforeseen contingency means some sort of natural disaster, or this sort of COVID. We had some Bhuj earthquake long back in Gujarat, or tsunami or something like this. If it happens, Uttarakhand floods, we have to spend more money. At that point we may not have immediately huge amount of cash with government. We will take an immediate loan and spend the money. Later we will try to resolve the situation, pay back the loan later. So this is meeting unforeseen contingencies. Then alternate source of income and taxable capacity is reached. So this is simple. We already saw at one point we cannot tax. Beyond a certain limit we cannot tax people. If we try to tax them further, they will not like it. Like I said, they will leave the country, and sometimes that is on individual level. At collective level, if you try to tax too much, then what happens to demand in the economy? People, disposable income will reduce if you tax too much, and demand will also reduce. Collectively also it creates some sort of lower demand vicious cycle, and individual level also people will get frustrated of too much of taxes and they will try to leave. So it is not a good idea to tax beyond a certain limit. A fair type of taxation, in people's perception they should feel that this tax is fair, and that is how we have to tax people. So that is when we are unable to tax further, we will go for loan, because we don't have other choice, no tax can be levied now, so we take a loan. So that is also one more. Then financing of wars. When we go for a war also, it is similar to unforeseen contingency only. We will try to take a loan and immediately fight the war. After the war is over, we will try to somehow pay back this loan. So then financing PSUs, public sector enterprises means, so whenever this PSUs need money, extra money to expand, government can take a loan and give it to them. Earlier we saw recapitalization of banks, that is also similar to financing of PSUs only. When the bank requires extra capital, then government will sell some bonds, receive some money, give that money to the bank. You understood this? So that the bank can achieve Basel III norms, reach 99%, 9% this capital adequacy ratio, give more loans, etc. For that government has to give money, because government is the owner of this bank, it has to give more capital to the bank. Similarly for PSUs, imagine ONGC Videsh Limited wants to explore more oil in Nigeria or some Angola or something, for that they need more money, more capital. So government will give more money for that oil exploration and such. So PSUs are doing whatever their business is for which they need more money, for that you can see government takes loan and gives money to them. You understood this? Then to carry out welfare programs and creating infrastructure, between these two there is a small concept that you have to understand. There is a debate in economy in India between Jagdish Bhagwati and Amartya Sen. Both are economists. Jagdish Bhagwati and Amartya Sen, debate between them is called as Sen Bhagwati debate, because Amartya economist, he got Nobel Prize. What he says is, it is very important for us to spend as much money as possible on welfare, because in India 20-30% people are poor and we have not even counted the poor properly. That means probably poverty is much more higher in India. Poor means, our definition of poverty is people who have more than 28 rupees if they are spending a day, they are not poor. 28 rupees people are not even able to afford basic meals also. We are assuming that they are able to afford meals, clothes, medicines, school, and you can say hospital, everything whatever is possible, everything they can, house also. And we are assuming if they have 28 rupees a day, they can afford everything. But that is not really true. Because of this reason, there is actually huge amount of hardship that is happening in the country which we are not acknowledging, we are not noticing. So Amartya Sen says that there is a moral responsibility on government to maximize welfare expenditure. As much as possible we have to give, you can say, more welfare schemes. We are already trying to give food under Food Security Act and housing under Awas Yojana. All these are actually after Amartya Sen and other welfare economists continuously argued that we have to spend more money on this. That is why we have opened all these welfare schemes, so that there is adequate amount of support. We created MG Narega, right to work, right to food and housing, and similarly midday meals and free education, right to education, and so similarly all these type of things we have created. This is Sen. But Bhagavati says, so if we are spending all the money on welfare itself, we will not have any money left for infrastructure development and further creation of more money. Where will we get more money for growth in the future? If we don't have growth at all, how can we achieve development? You understood this? Imagine right now we have 100 rupees. Amartya Sen saying entire 100 rupees you spend on people, because they are facing severe hardship right now. But Jagdish Bhagwati says, if we spend entire money on, you can say, saving present people only, when will we build roads and factories and infrastructure so that we will bring them out of poverty? You understood? Further development, if it has to happen, we have to invest this money, not just spend it on consumption. Because if we are giving free food and free houses and everything, it is just consumption. It cannot be considered purely as investment. You understood this? So this is basically Sen Bhagwati debate. It is similar to, consider you give a man a fish, then you feed him for a day. If you teach him fishing, you feed him for lifetime. This is what Bhagavati is saying. But Amartya Sen is saying, if the man is hungry, he will never be able to learn anything. That means you cannot teach a hungry man fishing. So that means First you have to feed him, then think about anything else. You understood this? So this is the debate between, you can say, Sen and Bhagwati. Government of India has considered both the positions, and we have tried to draw some sort of a line. We try to focus on both by splitting our money depending upon which party is in power. Usually NDA is on Bhagwati's side, 60% of money is spent on infrastructure and development, and UPA is on Amartya Sen's side, 60% money is spent on, you can say, welfare. But it is only 60-40 split here. It is not exactly, they are not spending too much on, you can say, one or the other. You understood this? So here, carrying out welfare programs and creating infrastructure, between them there is a trade-off. When we spend too much money on one, we don't have unlimited money, that means we spend less on the other. So sometimes when we don't have enough money to spend on both, we will take loans and spend, you can say, more, so that instead of having a trade-off, you can say, we can push it to later. But taking a loan does not mean the liability is over. Somebody has to pay back this loan in future. So right now if we are not compromising on either infrastructure or welfare, then we are compromising on somebody else. In future somebody has to pay, their interest is compromised. There is always a trade-off in economics. We just we are not recognizing somewhere, but if you look at it closely, somebody has to pay. There is no such thing as free anywhere. When it is free, then somebody is paying. You understood? When a product is free, there is a saying, you are the product. That means if Facebook is free, they are selling your data. So that is how it is. You can say there is nothing which is free. There will be somewhere, some cost will be associated with it. So creation of productive asset means, just like infrastructure, productive asset is much more broader. Maybe creating intellectual property also, like research and development, creating new medicines and such. For that also we sometimes take loans. For vaccines in COVID and such, you can say we took loans and invested more money to quickly develop a vaccine. You understood this? So these are all the reasons why we take public debt. So from here we will see in next class. If you have any questions, you can ask. Other students who have never seen me before, you can search me on Telegram and send me doubts if you have. Search me by my name and you will get it.